Transmigrated as a disabled protagonist, how should I continue the script? Chapter 5, Battle with the Demon God Again. Not far away, the Yokohama Ferris wheel spun slowly. While Mori Ogai was out for a walk, he encountered Dazai Osamu. This time, the crippled boy being hunted was nowhere to be seen beside him. "You came to see me alone." The first sentence carried a subtle hint of danger, but Mori Ogai's tone became much friendlier with the next. "I thought it was your friend who needed a doctor. Although you also look like you could use some treatment, judging by how you wrap your bandages, it seems like your external injuries shouldn't be too much of a problem." This was the Port Mafia's private doctor, the infamous black-clad man of Yokohama's underworld, a middle-aged man with long hair and a beard, holding the hand of a blonde girl. He had a carefree appearance, yet his medical skills were impeccable. With just a glance, he could tell that Dazai Osamu, who was wrapped in bandages, only had superficial, low-level injuries. Intelligent people wouldn't render themselves unable to move, and though Dazai Osamu liked to flirt with death, he was careful to avoid causing any long-term illnesses or disabilities. It may seem hard to understand, but Dazai Osamu wasn't simply chasing death, he was searching for something besides life and death, perhaps hope, or perhaps something about human nature. In any case, there was no need to explain this to outsiders. Meeting Mori privately, Dazai Osamu appeared like a stubborn young boy wrapped in injuries, yet his white shirt and black trousers gave him the refined and elegant demeanor of someone raised in a well-off family. With a deceptive smile, he said, "Not a friend, Yakimaru is my puppet." "A puppet?" Mori Ogai, recalling recent rumors, asked gently, "He seems to listen to you and doesn't interact with others. What method did you use to achieve that?" Dazai Osamu smugly replied, "He only listens to me." Inwardly, Mori Ogai raised his estimation of Dazai Osamu's value, though he didn't reveal his scrutiny. One large fox and one small fox were testing each other. "I'm merely an ordinary doctor, lucky enough to have treated the Port Mafia boss a few times. I'm not really one of them. I understand your struggles, but alas, there's little I can do to help you. Dr. Mori, you're far too modest. Just hearing you speak, it's clear you're not like the cold-blooded mafia. After all, I'm just a doctor." "That's right, Dr. Mori is quite well known in Yokohama's underworld. Your clinic is near Suribachi Street, and many who can't go to regular hospitals end up seeking out Dr. Mori, owing you many favors. I just scrape by to make a living. Sometimes, I don't even get paid for consultations." "Really? Isn't that a bit too much? Yokohama's underworld is chaotic. For outsiders like yourselves staying here for a while, you'll surely come to understand Yokohama's unique culture. You really shouldn't provoke the Port Mafia during this time." Mori Ogai shook his head, feeling sympathy for another boy who shouldn't have been saved. Dazai Osamu fell into thought. From Dr. Mori's words, he had already extracted a lot of useful information. For instance, the Port Mafia was on the verge of extreme chaos, and even the higher-ups couldn't stop the boss from going mad, which explained why the kill order hadn't been revoked yet. In other words, they had gotten involved with the Port Mafia at the worst possible time, and solving this problem through conventional methods would be very difficult. An alternative method just happened to be right in front of him. Dazai Osamu lifted his eyes to look at the man in black, who was followed by a young blonde girl acting mischievously toward him. "Titch. Dr. Mori must have a solution, right?" He opened his mouth to ask for help. Under Mori Ogai's indifferent "I can't help you" attitude, the young boy suddenly spoke slyly. "I think it's not that there's no solution, but that we're missing a moment of waiting." "What are you trying to say?" Mori Ogai finally looked at the boy with interest. "Many people in Yokohama are dissatisfied with the Port Mafia," Dazai Osamu plainly stated, calmly exposing the dark side of Yokohama. From within the Port Mafia organization to the street vendors selling snacks, this organization has angered many, losing the public's favor. But because of the government's lack of effective control, the situation is now on the verge of spiraling out of control. Dazai Osamu said to Mori Ogai, once the port mafia is destroyed, those dangers will cease to exist. Mori Ogai, using a tolerance for Dazai's flaws tones, replied, that's not the case. The adult said, without the port mafia, Yokohama will only become more chaotic, so chaotic that it won't care about any of you, and so chaotic that you won't be able to live peacefully on this land in Yokohama anymore. The boy wrinkled his nose, that sounds really troublesome. Mori Ogai smiled and said, I'm just a humble man with the surname Mori, first name Ogai. May I ask for your name? Understanding the olive branch extended to him, the boy gazed at him with cold, rational eyes, his pupils reflecting the spinning wheels not far away. Within those sharp eyes, there was still a glimmer of light not completely swallowed by darkness. Beneath the surface of his condition, was Dazai Osamu, a person whose precious mind had yet to be fully shaped. I am Dazai Osamu. He had found him. Someone who could understand the current situation and was willing to bear the risks. Mori Ogai, kindly wrapping his words with deadly poison, gently asked, if I were to say that I have a solution, but it would require taking on some danger, would you be willing, for your friend, your puppet, to go to such lengths? Dazai Osamu suddenly stepped forward quickly, startling Mori Ogai, and Elise, alert, immediately stood in front of Mori Ogai to shield him. On Dazai Osamu's face was a mixture of joy and an intense enthusiasm for death. I love danger the most. Tell me, will it kill me? It will, yes. That's great. He cheered, his smile radiant as he said, I knew Mori-san was a good person. In a short amount of time, this man had gained the trust of the port mafia's boss, a man in black with inscrutable intentions. Their goals were indeed aligned. Yakimaru wasn't slow when it came to matters concerning himself. Lately, he had been feeling sleepy more often, indicating that either something unusual was happening with his body, or there was an issue with the food he was consuming. He was always willing to trust the other person, the pure life flame would never be wrong. That person must be Dororo. As long as there weren't any anomalies like someone transmigrating, the life flame represents a person's soul. After all, who could successfully disguise a soul as pure? Yakimaru, with his keen senses, knew very well that someone who had never killed, someone harmless, posed no threat. In the face of this malicious world, the only thing he could trust was the power he had gained in this life. Each time he woke up, Yakimaru's body, with its excellent resilience, quickly adapted to the effects of the sleeping drugs, building up a tolerance. He leaned against the corner of the wall, and in the confined space, his keen senses lost more than half of their effectiveness. He had no specific concept of time, only counting the lonely numbers, slowly reciting from 1 to 100. From 100 to 1,000. From 1,000 to 10,000. Sometimes, Yakimaru felt as if he truly was just a simulated puppet, his soul hidden within his damaged body, without arms or legs, like a person subjected to the ancient punishment of human stumps. He was close to forgetting what normal sensation felt like. 14 years had passed, and even the phantom pains of his spirit were fading. During battles, he no longer cared about the bloodshed. If he were to be thrown into the infinite loop of the main god space, would his mental strength surpass 1,000? No, he hadn't yet developed the ability to scan with his mind. The limits were too vast. Yakimaru could no longer afford to wait. If Dororo encountered danger, wouldn't that mean he would be forced to sit idly by? After all, in a young boy's story, the hero saving the damsel in distress is never missing. He shoved past the obstacle that Dazai Osamu had set up, leaping over the crate, his face cold and emotionless as he walked out. Day and night had lost their meaning. In his eyes, there was only the life flame. He wanted to find that pure white flame of life. When Dazai Osamu returns as normal, what he saw was the scene after Yakimaru getting lost. It was the first time he had been busy for someone else for so long, and upon returning to find the person missing, Dazai Osamu felt a chill in his heart. Dazai Osamu gritted his teeth, next time, I'll plant a tracker. Luckily, Though there wasn't a tracker, he had placed a GPS device on Yakimaru, ensuring that Yakimaru didn't slip out of his control. Tezuka Osamu activated the GPS and saw the red dot move to its location. It's Suribachi Street. Not only did Tezuka Osamu know that Yakimaru liked going to Suribachi Street, but Yakimaru also knew that once the other couldn't find him, there was a very high chance he would come to Suribachi Street to look for him. Suribachi Street was the place Yakimaru was most familiar with at the moment, where the small, tightly packed houses, arranged like thick teeth, made it incredibly convenient for jumping and climbing. Though the street was crowded with people, there was little need for concern. As long as the life flames had a red glow, he could simply knock them out in one hit. It's possible that as long as he kept beating these people up, he could draw out a weaker demon god. This time, the unfortunate victims were members of the sheep organization. Killing isn't an exclusive privilege of adults. The younger the child, the more incomplete their worldview. When they do bad things, it often comes from a momentary impulse, and once it's over, their fear and terror don't last long. Shirase had been part of the sheep for many years and was one of the founding members. After picking up the mysterious Nakahara Chuuya on Suribachi Street, he and the other members of the sheep had gained a certain level of reputation on Suribachi Street. Adults without any background didn't even have the courage to bully them. A month ago, Shirase accidentally killed someone who had been his target for robbery. Luckily, no one saw it happen, and he was able to shift the blame onto others on Suribachi Street. Returning to the sheep's base, Shirase had moments of fear and anxiety, terrified that Nakahara Chuuya would find out, since they all knew Nakahara Chuuya didn't like the senseless killing of innocents. He had even been furious with their acts of robbery. Fortunately, the powerful Nakahara Chuuya, who could crush any enemy, didn't notice anything wrong with Shirase. Instead, upon hearing that someone had died, he advised everyone to be cautious when going out and not to give the enemy any chances to take advantage. Within just a few weekends, the fear in his heart completely disappeared. Killing someone wasn't such a big deal after all. Where was all that seriousness Chuuya talked about, like how killing an innocent would leave you feeling regret and guilt for the rest of your life? None of that happened. Killing meant he no longer had to worry about his robbery targets seeking revenge. Shirase thought he had matured, and he even imagined bragging to his comrades about the feeling of killing someone in the future. But without his knowledge, the life flame now glowed with a red light, tainting his already impure soul with sin. Help! Chuuya won't forgive you. Shirase was beaten terribly by Yakimaru, with tears and snot streaming down his face, his cries echoing far and wide. Many residents of Suribachi Street, delighting in his misfortune, quickly recognized the silver-haired boy being dealt with by Yakimaru as Shirase from the sheep organization. Not only that, some residents who were familiar with special abilities whispered, "Does that boy have the ability to distinguish between good and evil? Why can he always find those notorious thugs?" Others took the opportunity to mock, saying, "I knew Shirase wasn't anything good, but I didn't expect him to be such a coward. Getting beaten and still yelling out loud, afraid people won't hear the great name of the Sheep King, huh?" Without the Sheep King, this organization, formed by a group of ordinary boys for self-defense, would never have lasted until today. But, the power to control gravity is truly strong. Chuuya, Shirase is getting beaten up. In the sheep's base, a member who didn't dare go to the rescue rushed back, shouting in panic. Nakahara Chuuya, who was sitting in the base playing a video game, looked up. Huh? He bent his knees and stretched out his legs to stand up, tossing the newly bought video game console onto the chair, instantly making the other boys in the sheep excitedly scramble to be next to play. Nakahara Chuuya's first reaction was that Shirase must have messed with the wrong person, provoking someone he shouldn't have. However, the member of the sheep who reported back insisted, Shirase didn't do anything. We were just walking down the street when he was suddenly knocked to the ground by someone. I couldn't even fight back against that person. Chuuya, hurry up, he's going to be beaten to death. Before Nakahara Chuuya even reached the scene, he could already hear Shirase's continuous screams of pain. Furious, he shouted, "Who dares to go against the sheep?" And with that, he rushed ahead. The moment he laid eyes on the scene, he froze for a second, clearly seeing that the person beating Shirase was none other than Yakimaru. "So it's you." Yakimaru hadn't even bothered to draw his blade while dealing with Shirase. With just his fists and feet, he easily subdued him. Through the fight, he could see the red glow of Shirase's life flame, and he was preparing to lie in wait, expecting the next wave of similar individuals to appear. As expected, when the color-changing demon god appeared, Yakimaru once again confirmed that evildoers and demon gods were always tightly connected. Every life flame with a red glow should not be spared. Those people were either aiding tyrants in their atrocities or had blood-stained hands from killing, completely undeserving of Yakimaru's sympathy. After all, who would feel sympathy for Yakimaru, who had become this way because of the demon gods? Just as Yakimaru made up his mind to once again risk his life to test the strength of the demon god, Nakahara Chuuya didn't immediately lash out in anger. Instead, he looked in Shirase's direction with a trace of doubt in his eyes. "Why did you beat him? Shirase hasn't killed anyone like I have, he shouldn't have been attacked by you." After paying close attention for so many days, Nakahara Chuuya finally uncovered the truth behind the attacks on him. It turns out that the targets in Suribachi Street were chosen based on a single criterion: those whose hands were stained with blood and had committed countless wrongdoings. Occasionally, the wrong person might get attacked, but the people in Suribachi Street generally agreed that those people had abandoned their evil ways and sought redemption. Nakahara Chuuya thought about this and felt helpless. Was he just one of the rare cases accidentally harmed by the other person? But the people he killed were all bad people. Yakimaru didn't care about others' opinions. He charged straight at Nakahara Chuuya, his dim gray-brown eyes giving off an air of arrogance, fully focused on his determined task. Nakahara Chuuya, hands still in his pockets, unleashed his deep red special ability without hesitation. Gravity manipulation. Anything he touched could have its gravity manipulated by him. Yakimaru swung his arm, but the change in gravity altered the direction of his attack. He quickly adjusted, avoiding everything tainted with the red force. His sharp agility made Nakahara Chuuya click his tongue in frustration, sensing trouble. His attacks couldn't land on the opponent, and the opponent couldn't hit him either. His manipulation of gravity was being evaded, while he knew nothing about this person except for the blades attached to their arms. Who knows if the ability to distinguish between good and evil, such an abstract concept, could manifest into a tangible power? What if it was an ability specifically targeting evildoers? In short, Nakahara Chuuya held some reservations and didn't dare to relentlessly pursue the fight as he usually would. Yes, he had killed people, but after understanding the nature of the opponent's targets, his hostility faded. Let's leave a few good people in this world. As for Shirase, if Nakahara Chuuya hadn't guessed wrong, Shirase probably killed someone recently. Nakahara Chuuya's internal thoughts were difficult to put into words. His bright blue eyes dimmed slightly, and once again, he released his fighting spirit. Under the oppressive force of the Sheep King's serious demeanor on Suribachi Street, Yakimaru clearly struggled. Unable to use his blades for fear of damage, he had to focus on protecting his limbs in hand-to-hand combat. A new round of engagement was destined to not last long. Yakimaru was highly aware of his surroundings, but no sooner had his feet touched the ground that it was quickly covered in red. He leaped up, reacting with incredible speed, surpassing Nakahara Chuuya's ability release speed. Nakahara Chuuya, slightly delayed but strategic, was already in midair, twisting as he extended a leg. "Get down here." Yakimaru was struck in the back by Nakahara Chuuya's kick, sending him crashing toward the ground. Missing the chance to evade, Yakimaru's legs sank down as the red glow of the special ability quickly enveloped his body. His body soon bent under what felt like the weight of hundreds of pounds, forcing him to crouch. This was Nakahara Chuuya showing mercy, refraining from shattering his opponent's body. The brilliant display of hand-to-hand combat reshaped the Suribachi Street residents' perception of the Sheep King. This young man, who had grown up on Suribachi Street, possessed not only a powerful special ability but also exceptional martial arts skills and strategic combat planning. Still, it felt a bit like bullying. Yakamaru's martial arts were clearly superior to the Sheep King's, yet he was constantly at a disadvantage. It gave the impression of a non-ability user fiercely challenging a master with special abilities. Each minute of endurance felt like an explosion of human potential. Finally, after all this time, I've caught you. Nakahara Chuuya lifted his chin, looking like a classic thug under the hood of his hoodie, ready to rough someone up. He walked toward Yakamaru, temporarily forgetting about Shirase, his nerves tighten, constantly alert for any sudden developments. Before he could take another step closer, Yakamaru was already stimulated by the dark red life flame of the demon god. His body trembled slightly, his expression cold and indifferent, as he relentlessly forced himself away from the presence of the demon god. I cannot be defeated by the demon god. I want to reclaim the body parts I've lost. I want to touch this world again. If necessary. I'm willing to abandon my current limbs. As Yakamaru concentrated all his willpower to resist, the remnants of the demon god's red energy within him surged, glowing like a flickering candlelight. This diminished the gravitational ability covering his entire body significantly. Is it similar to Arahabaki? Nakahara Chuuya sensed that the root power of divine forces was weakening, and his hair stood on end in shock. Wait! Don't forcibly escape with that power, you'll get hurt. I'm not your enemy, ah. In that instant, Nakahara Chuuya, who had been searching for his origins for years, shouted in fear. The next moment, Yakamaru broke free, staggering backward, one leg slipping free from its bindings, and part of his worn-out clothing falling off. His leg is gone. Nakahara Chuuya almost felt his soul leave his body, thinking that he had accidentally snapped off Yakamaru's leg. He instantly withdrew his gravitational force. The pressure on Yakamaru disappeared, but he didn't even bother to retrieve his fallen leg. His body swayed slightly, and using the strength of his arms, he fled without looking back. Nakahara Chuuya's entire body trembled as he hurried to pick up the leg that had fallen to the ground. It was a complete leg, extending up to the thigh, with no warmth or flesh like that of a living person. Just like the boy's arms, it was an artificial limb. It went without saying, this boy, who wielded powers similar to Arahabaki, had no real limbs at all. A stitched-together human. A different kind of beings born from divine power. Nakahara Chuuya, sweating profusely, didn't hesitate to pick up the leg and chase after the other, unleashing his fastest speed. Stop for me. But after the first chase, there was a second, and then a third. Internally, Nakahara Chuuya was falling apart. Half an hour later, when Disastrous Osamu found Yakamaru, he was sitting by the roadside, missing a leg. There were no traces of fresh blood beneath the hem of his clothing, and he looked more like a damaged puppet than a living person. The black-haired boy, with his hair tied in a ponytail, turned his face toward Disastrous Osamu as he approached. The hollow, lifeless eyes held neither pain nor despair. Only calm and solitude. Disastrous Osamu didn't know what to say. To live like this, by his own logic, death would be a kind of release. Why cling to life? Without hands, without legs, unable to touch this world. No eyes, no tongue, no ears, unable to know what this world looks like. It's not stupidity, but what's the point of clinging to life? This world has never treated you kindly. Can you stand up? Countless harsh words could have come from Disastrous Osamu, but when he spoke, they turned into this instead. He helped Yakamaru up with a light touch, and Yakamaru quickly understood his intention. Balancing on one leg, he stood up, slightly taller than Disastrous Osamu, his back straight despite the situation. Disastrous Osamu wouldn't let him use his bladed arms and found a branch to act as a crutch to help him maintain his balance. Yakamaru felt apologetic towards Dororo for letting them see him without his left leg. I'm really sorry. He couldn't maintain a decent appearance. Disastrous Osamu, without hesitation, said, still managing to stand, huh? Not bad. Next time you run off, let's hope you don't lose your head. After scolding Yakimaru, Dazai Osamu took half a step ahead of him, grabbing hold of him to bring him back. That night, Dazai Osamu tied Yakimaru up in a safe area. To ensure the blades wouldn't unsheath, he used a method that referenced something unspeakable, tying his shoulders and arms together. This left Yakimaru almost hanging in mid-air, his usually expressionless face showing a rare hint of innocence and pity. Dazai Osamu showed no sympathy at all, coldly pointing at Yakimaru's nose as he warned him. Stay here. This Dororo is really fierce. Yakimaru couldn't move, and with his gaze fixed, he could only watch the life flames drift away from him. Late at night, Suribachi Street greeted the sound of Dazai Osamu descending the stairs. In his hand was the banned book he had bought earlier, Complete Suicide, which he read as he walked. The boy's figure blended with the shadows of the eaves, appearing even darker and more eerie than the people who actually lived there. After inquiring and learning what had happened during the day, Dazai Osamu calmly, yet chillingly, said, "The Sheep King, the leader of a flock of little lambs, right?" First, he used his gravity ability to defeat Yakimaru, destroying one of his legs. Then he went on to chase after Yakimaru, forcing him to flee in desperation. While this 100% matched the facts, there was something about the description that didn't sit quite right. If Nakahara Chuuya were to hear it, he would surely stomp his foot in anger and retort, "I didn't intend to destroy his leg." He was the one who insisted on running away. No matter how much he tried to explain, Nakahara Chuuya's reputation as the villain in this story was already set. Dazai Osamu had deeply remembered him. How to dismantle the sheep from within. It seems the best way is to make them collapse internally, stabbing them hard from the inside. Back at the sheep's base, Nakahara Chuuya was still fuming, interrogating Shirase. "Explain yourself clearly. Who exactly did you kill?" "I didn't." Shirase, his entire body aching and his face bruised, looked utterly disbelieving. Nakahara Chuuya would rather trust the enemy than believe his words. Nakahara Chuuya felt deeply disappointed. "I gave you a chance, and you're still hiding things from me. Do you really think that person would come out of nowhere just to attack you? Why don't you go and ask the other residents of Suribachi Street if he ever attacks the wrong person?" Shirase protested loudly, "I was the one being attacked. And instead of caring, you're blaming me. Isn't it you who's killed the most people in our sheep organization?" Nakahara Chuuya shot a vicious glare at him, his cold, domineering eyes making Shirase shrink back a bit. Chuuya only frightened him when he was in a storm of rage. "I kill to protect myself and for retaliation." This was the line that the boy who had grown up in this place had never crossed. "If I find out that you killed an innocent person, I'm sorry. I won't protect you anymore, Shirase. You better pray that the person you killed deserved it, because I can't accept that one of my comrades is a liar, a killer, someone who has no respect for the lives of others." These words carried a heavy weight. The other members of the sheep shifted uneasily, no longer treating Shirase's situation as mere entertainment. They quickly stepped in, offering some kind words to mediate the situation. Nakahara Chuuya was mentally exhausted and had no interest in hearing the others' attempts to mediate. He shot a glance at Shirase, who still refused to admit anything, and then returned to his own room. Sitting on the edge of his bed, he pressed his hands against his forehead, covering the light from the ceiling with his palms. He rarely used his hands like this, afraid of losing control of his power. His hands had become the trigger for fully utilizing Arahabaki's power. Suppressing his frustration, Nakahara Chuuya glanced over at the leg sitting on his desk, his eye twitching slightly. What kind of mess is all this? He didn't know. More serious matters awaited him ahead. Nakahara Chuuya had inadvertently offended someone who was known for holding grudges. That person, with a small-minded nature, approached the sheep base, expressionless in the darkness, muttering to himself. "The sheep takes in orphans and young people, how nice. I fit those requirements." He touched the bandages on his face, then let out a blood-curdling scream as he ran toward the sheep's headquarters. Help! The port mafia is after me. Before Yakimaru could starve to death, he will spend 3 days dismantling this boring organization. For some reason, when Nakahara Chuuya heard the mournful cry from outside, he shivered, as if he were hearing the background sound of a ghost story in the middle of the night. Who's out there, running to us for help in the middle of the night? He impatiently stepped outside, grumbling under his breath, but deep down, he still considered protecting those weaker than him as his responsibility. Those with power naturally have to bear a little more. Chapter 5 End.